Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, as you know, we took last week off. Thank you for your consideration and your empathy on the issue. But your teammate here had, or still has COVID. And, I thought it was, help me out, a pandemic only for the unvaccinated. And I believe it was Rachel Maddow said, if you have a vaccination, you have nothing to worry about. How did I get it?
Yeah, they've been pushing that story for quite a while. And the fact of the matter is, most people who are getting COVID are vaccinated. The vaccines do not stop the transmission, they only lower the symptoms. So, yes, should you get vaccinated? Absolutely, because it can keep you out of the hospital, it can keep you
Agreed.
from dying, but it's not going to keep you from getting COVID.
In fact, Dr. Fauci himself has gotten COVID, correct?
Yes, we got word of that just before we started recording. Dr. Fauci has tested positive for COVID. And of course, Fauci is double vaxxed with, I believe, 2 booster shots, but yet he still managed to contract COVID.
Well, he'll have more time to practice pitching.
Right. Now, of course,
remember when he threw out the first ball?
The big thing to remember about all of this is that COVID's not going to go away. It's going to be like the flu now. It's going to keep coming back, but it's going to be relatively mild compared to earlier variants.
Yeah, and I would concur, Dr. Lopkin, that I was being a little flippant, but yes, there's no question about it. I am glad I got the vaccine. I'm glad I got the booster. I remember earlier symptoms. I know people who got it before the vaccine, who were in very good health, and they said they wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy. For me, it was a waste of 2 weeks, so to speak, because I was completely out of it. But I would say overall, knock on wood, mild symptoms and just a big pain in the ass.
Yeah, that's pretty much what COVID has become now. It's not this massive, deadly virus that we all have to be concerned about. It's something that most people probably have gotten already. Yes, the vaccines help. They keep the death rate down, they keep the hospitalization rate down, but we're still going to keep getting it.
But how about the Mr. Biden? Didn't he say he was going to take out the virus? What happened? Remember that during the campaign?
That was
said
his big thing. He was going to stop the virus in his tracks. And by the same token, inflation is transitory. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was a rousing success. So, this is the bull coming from Joe Biden.
Well, Joe Biden has some real issues, obviously. He did the AFL-CIO speech in Philadelphia. And I'm telling you, I love to be entertained. And every day, I have to admit, before I start work, I go to YouTube, and you can always get a good 2-minute segment on the esteemed president. So they had the clips of him addressing this gathering. Hardly any applause. And, once it was a bellwether for any Democrat. But I think many of those many of the people in the audience probably voted for Trump and would vote against Biden. But that's another issue. But him screaming into the mic, it's funny because I have a twisted sense of humor, but it's also a little, someone at work, he was telling me he thought it was disturbing. Like, we have changed people's lives. Yeah, you've made them a lot crappier. You did an excellent job changing people's lives. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yes, they've changed them for the worse. My favorite clip is the one where he's yelling that he's tired of the lies. Well, if he's tired of the lies, he should stop telling them. It's as simple as that.
He had a lie. He's basically, everyone talking about Trump, bending the truth. This guy is a congenital liar. I mean, everything he said, he actually said that he wrote with a pen the Build Back Better. Now, first of all, it
Right.
wouldn't
We
be a
all, yeah,
pen because it would be a crayon, and
we all
I
know he
doubt he could.
didn't do that, but
Of course
even
not. Come on.
even the liberal media was fact checking his speech, and he said that inflation in the United States is lower than anywhere in the world. Well,
Wrong.
that's an abject lie. The European Union has lower inflation. Mexico, Turkey, China, Israel all have lower inflation
Even some
rates than we
countries in
do.
Africa, South Africa, and I forgot Uganda or something, have lower inflation. I mean, I think he just makes shit up. I mean, he said he was a professor at UPenn. He barely got into law school. Believe me, he was no professor at UPenn.
No,
Professor of what?
he talked about the economy expanding. Of course, we all know from the GDP that the economy contracted last quarter. Almost everything he said was either an abject lie or he really is delusional.
I think it's both. I think that, and I'm not a doctor, but I've known people that had relatives and people close to them who actually had dementia. And in fact, there a cousin of mine, his mother unfortunately has it now, and he said it, not me, that whatever they were inclined to be just gets exponentially more magnified. So if they were an
Yes.
angry person, they're going to be really angry. So for him, he was always had an anger and a macho issue, and he always had a problem with the truth. He got caught in law school cheating, and the first campaign in 1988 for president, he's so stupid. I think he ripped off Winston Churchill
Yeah,
and Robert
he
Kennedy,
had to,
you moron.
yes, he had to leave the campaign because of his plagiarism. Yeah,
And also during that
he was
campaign,
never a bright person.
no,
This, and let's face it, the only reason he's president is because he was packaged as a centrist. And from the moment he took office, that also was a big lie.
and a uniter.
Yeah,
Remember, he was
which
going
he
to be the
hasn't. Yeah.
uniter.
Well, no.
He's never talked to.
He has
I agree.
united the country.
I agree.
No president has ever had a lower approval rating uniting the country against him.
You know something? He's done more for minority relations than any. You have Hispanics, blacks joining traditional white constituencies against this guy. I mean, Hispanics. What is he? He's got a 24% approval.
The
Out of
latest
control.
the latest poll among Hispanics, Biden's approval rating is 24%. And you saw that in the special election in Texas, where for the first time in over a decade, a Mexican born American citizen won the election as a Republican. So and she is the first Mexican born American citizen to hold office. And she's a Republican. So, all of these, the Democrats are so anxious to tick boxes, but Republicans are the ones that are actually giving the opportunity to minorities to hold office.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I think that it's also a very interesting fact that was a plus 13 Democratic region. And this person, I think, won by 8 points. And the Democrats, because they're great at spinning bullshit, were saying, oh, in spite of all the money donated or contributed to this campaign, she's squeaking out is not 8 points. That's domination.
No, 8 points is not squeaking. And something else that came out in the last couple of days is that the Democratic National Committee, aside from the money they're spending on their own campaigns, has been donating money to Republican primaries to try to defeat Republicans that they think will take the swing states.
Well, also you can chalk that up to desperate. You're in deep dog do when you're doing stupid shit like that. Makes no sense. Obviously, they're not behind their own candidates because they know they have to do some trickery to pull this one out of the hat.
Yeah, I mean, more and more Democrats come out every day saying they fully expect not just a red wave in November, but
A
a
tsunami.
tsunami. They're going to get walloped.
Yeah, and in fact, oh, I don't believe it's true. I do not. But I was watching a show with Dick Morris, and he had a pollster on, and they were talking about the Senate and how the Republicans are going to pick up a lot more seats than people think, I hope. And they actually, I know this is not true, but I did hear this, even though I had COVID, I was not completely delusional. They talked about even states like Connecticut. It's not going to happen, I get it, but
Well, no, yeah,
imagine Blumenthal.
Connecticut
I
is not
understand.
switching red, but
I understand, but
however, you are seeing places across the country switch red where they never thought it would happen. There's actually a congressional district in California that may go Republican. We just saw in San Francisco, the most liberal city in the country, a repeal of their district attorney, or because the liberal
and do you know who
platform,
drove that, by the way?
it is
Is
absolutely amazing that the liberal politicians do not see that the country as a whole is saying enough is
enough is
enough.
enough. And you know who led that recall? Asian Americans in San Francisco, who are the victims of a lot of hate crimes, essentially.
Yes.
And speaking of that, I was watching Fox News because of my COVID. It was some positive of that because it helped me brush up for this show. And they had this beautiful, stunningly gorgeous woman on the show. She's Israeli, an Israeli American, right? And she was she lives in California. She was talking about the rampant anti-Israeli fervor and anti-Semitism that's just blowing through California. And just why it's an issue, because it's an issue because anti-Semitism anywhere has to be addressed. But also, California is kind of like the bellwether of liberal ideology, and it shows you where they are. But where's Chuck Schumer? Where is Richard Blumenthal? Where's the others? You know, they're talking about white supremacy. Blumenthal can't wait to get in front of the camera. I mean, isn't it not just their civic, but their duty as Jews to say something? I never heard him say anything about this, and
No,
it's rampant supposedly.
the Democrats have been very quiet about this. The only time they ever stood up was when the squad tried to squash our sending Iron Dome weapons to Israel. But Ilhan Omar has been spouting anti Semitism from the moment she stepped in front of a camera. According to the FBI, Jews are the largest group of hate crimes, and this is not new. This is
Yeah,
year after year.
but the perpetuators of that are usually the hard left liberal Democrats. It's not
Yes.
Republicans doing it. It used to be, the good old boys. That was the that was the caricature, and they might have, not like Jews. No, it's not that way at all. It's the hard left, and I think it's only a finger in the dike. I believe that the trend, if left unchecked, which I have no reason to think it's going to be checked, I think that Jews, Democratic liberal Jews, better wake up and smell the coffee, because they're contributing to their own demise. And it's as simple as that. I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right. Why, at this point, any Jew is still supporting the Democratic Party when they have been thwarting Israel, when they have done nothing to combat anti Semitism?
They've encouraged it.
Yeah, in many cases they have. And they don't speak up against their own Congress people when they say anti Semitic remarks. I don't
Well,
understand why any Jew would still be supporting
I
that
agree. I
party.
agree. And in fact, I've become very angry towards that, because it's like, wake up, moron. You're what's called a useful idiot. Okay, you're a pawn of these people, and you need to and stop putting your own agenda ahead of the Jewish faith. Okay, and Israel. So stop being so self-centered, Mr.
Well,
Blumenthal.
it's not even just the Jewish faith. I mean, if you take a look at the last 18 months where the left has had control, you've got, I mean, this is, they've basically tried to destroy American relations with Israel. They've increased anti Semitism. They've tried to destroy the country over their agenda. And people are stepping out now. They are finally saying enough is enough. And in fact, more and more Democrats have been coming out and saying, you know what? Thank God that Joe Manchin stopped Build Back Better, because otherwise things would be so much worse.
Oh, you know something? If Time Magazine was a real publication like it used to be, Manchin would probably get Man of the Person of the Year, and rightfully so. If it wasn't for him and Silliman, there would have been cinema. It would have been another 3 trillion. And
Yeah,
this
no,
guy is so
inflation
stupid,
would
Biden.
be through the roof. And you know, I've said this many times, but Manchin, Cinema, the other centrist Democrats, those are the real base. That's the real Democratic Party. It's been hijacked by Sanders and the squad, who many times don't even identify as Democrats. They call themselves independent socialists. They call themselves
Yeah,
democratic
but you know
socialists,
something?
but they're not
I
Democrats.
most of your theories I find enlightening and spot on. Nah, these people are voting along with these nutcases. Besides Manchin and maybe a handful of others, they're either useful idiots or they don't have the guts to buck the system, but they're in bed with these morons and they're guilty as charged.
Well, it could be, but I think we'll see a different story come
I
November.
hope so. Well, speaking of a different story and a crazy story, oh, by the way, with the whole Biden thing, I call it the night of the long knives. You even see CNN, Don Lemon, no genius by any stretch, or conservative, basically the last 2 nights have taken the Biden administration to task. I think it's a couple things. What we talked about, CNN, possibly maybe Lemon looking out for his own career, but there was a guest on Anderson Cooper who literally, I think is a CNN contributor, young person, young guy, basically saying that Biden literally said Biden is a disaster, and he had a graph or a chart that his ratings on inflation are lower than Jimmy Carter a la
Yep.
1978. And that's
Well,
CNN. They would never have that crap on a year ago. No way.
well, the New York Times had an article where they interviewed 50 highly placed Democrats. And these folks came out and said, you know, we can't do anything about him right now, but after the midterms, most of these Democrats are abandoning Joe Biden. They are basically trying to push him aside because and this was one of the Democrats described him as an anchor that the party cannot lift.
You know something that I agree with 1,000%. I believe if the midterms are anything like people think it's going to be, or worse, because if you look at the trend, Dr. Lopkin, right now it's a disaster. But if you could look into the future and think things are going to get better, then you could say, okay, it might not be, yeah, it'll be a red wave, but maybe not a tsunami. No, the trajectory is south, meaning for Biden. So it could only get worse. And I agree with you 150%. When the shit hits the fan in November, it's going to make the night of the long knives look like a B movie.
Yeah, they're already planning to abandon him. AOC publicly stated, you know, well, we'll see if we support him if he runs for reelection. The left has no intention of supporting him because he could not get their agenda passed. Now, in all fairness, that's not his fault. That is the fact that they had a razor thin majority in the House and a 50-50 Senate. They vastly overestimated what the American people wanted from them. And now they're throwing their little temper tantrums because they didn't get their way.
Well, a question I have to ask you, it's actually been on my mind. Does the squad, does AOC, does Bernie, who's really the architect of the Democratic Party's demise, after the midterms, do they lose favor, lose status, or gain status? I say lose.
Oh, I definitely think they're going to lose status because they are the ones that are responsible for losing independent
That's
voters, for
There you go.
losing centrist Democrats. And you cannot win elections without independent voters. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. When that voting booth comes in, there is that independent swing voter. They are the ones that decide what happens. And the left alienated virtually every independent voter.
Yes, they did, and alienated their strong base. We talked about
Yes.
Hispanic. The polls with Hispanic voters with Biden, 24%. That's lower than white voters. I mean, that's right up there with Republicans. That's bad.
24% is the lowest approval rating that Biden has with any group. So, yes, this is the largest minority group. The Democrats basically just took them for granted, and now they are switching to Republicans in droves.
And they also patronize them like they do every other ethnic group. They did it to blacks and they did it to Hispanics, thinking that they're into illegal immigrant. No, they're not. They're into law and order. They're into the same. They're more entrepreneurial than white Americans, quite frankly, if you do the research on it. And I think they took them for granted. And I think the big story, that's a huge story, 24% with Hispanic voters. I think they're in for a rude awakening with African Americans. What do you think, Dr. Lofton?
Oh, yes, there have been more African American Republicans running for office this year than in any previous year. And that's going to carry African American voters. So you're seeing this massive switch of groups that the Democrats have long considered their base, long taken for granted, and they are now switching to the Republican Party. And you're going to see this in November, where they're going to lose the House, they're going to lose the Senate. And, we talked about this earlier as something that we figured would never happen. But now it's actually starting to look like the Republicans may be able to get 60 seats in the Senate. It's still a long shot. But if things keep going on along the trend that they are, it is actually within the realm of possibility.
It is, and then that would be something that would just be totally amazing. But still, when you look at it, even if the Republicans get a solid majority in the House and get a majority in the Senate, plus Biden's lack of support in his own party, you're talking lame duck on steroids.
Oh, absolutely. He would be a complete lame duck.
Gone.
Because you're talking about within the Senate, it's not just a Republican majority that he would have to deal with. You're talking about Joe Manchin. You're talking about Kirsten Sinema. These are folks that will vote on a bipartisan basis to stop a lot of these ridiculous policies.
Yeah, but you have another good point, because I think you're going to have others coming to Jesus, so to speak, who narrowly escape death. I'm talking Democrats who will possibly, even if they're not in Republicans by name, would actually almost be a veto-proof voting bloc. Could be.
It is actually possible that the Senate could put together a veto-proof coalition of Republicans and Democrats and with the Republican House to stop Biden's agenda cold and actually reverse some of the damage he's done.
That will be. I'll say one thing. Whatever it comes, well, it'll be Tuesday. Yeah, so we'll do our show on Wednesday like we always do, just projecting ahead in November. But I'm definitely staying up all night for that one because that's going to be must see TV.
Oh,
Especially if
absolutely.
you watch MSNBC. They'll probably have basically safe rooms and what security dogs or comfort dogs or something, whatever. It'll be something to see. Something that was supposed to be something to see, but really didn't turn out to be that much of it is a January 6th, pretty much an implosion because who really gives a shit about this, what, 18 or 16 month old, it's like old stale milk where the economy is in flames and people can't afford gas. And there's really, I mean, there's no question that there's some meat on the bone, but I think it fell way short of what they thought it would be.
Well, first of all, they call these the January 6th hearings. These are not actually hearings. That's a
They're
misnomer.
tribunals.
In a hearing, witnesses are cross examined. There was no cross examination, it was just hand picked people making statements. Now, if you follow what the commission has uncovered, their latest theory right now is that no, Donald Trump did not specifically tell people to go to the Capitol and riot. He did not do that. But they say he is responsible for the riots because from election day to January 6th, he kept claiming that the election was fraudulent. Well, if you take that theory to its natural conclusion, they're actually saying the election was stolen from Trump, not by fake votes and fraudulent voting on election day, but as the result of 4 years of Russian collusion nonsense, the Steele dossier banging the drum, two phony impeachments.
Or one phony impeachment.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
because it was kind of after the fact, after the election.
yeah,
The
I mean,
second
but it
one,
was
yeah.
it was still two, and
The first
if you
one was absolutely, I'm sorry, but
yeah,
absolutely pathetic, anti-American. I mean, if that's and they did irreparable damage because what happens, shit can come back and bite you because now the bar's so low for impeachment, you can impeach someone for what? Throwing a wrapper out of their car.
exactly. So if they stick with the theory that Donald Trump is responsible for January 6th because he did not accept that the election was legitimate, then you also have to accept the theory that the election was illegitimate because of 4 years of fraud on the part of the Democrats. So
Which is
they're actually disproving their own point.
and if you're going to use that as your criteria, then Stacey Abrams, who's running in Georgia, she never accepted her defeat either.
Right.
Why isn't she indicted?
Right. She still says, "Oh no, she won. It was fraud." It's like, no, it wasn't fraud. We just saw in the Georgia primaries record turnout despite what the Biden administration and Stacey Abrams tried to paint as voter suppression
Yeah.
laws.
And you know what?
Yes.
Something one thing that you said that I'd like to revisit because I think it's very important, and that is when you talked about we were talking about the black constituency in the Democratic Party, and what you said is really important because I see it more and more. Increasingly, I see Republican African American Congress people, political figures, business people. That's got to play out in the community. So they're not just getting this one-sided situation. There's almost becoming a counterbalance to the 1960 coalition.
Yes, you're seeing more and more people go, well, wait a minute. The Democrats have been shouting racism, 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 and yet the Republicans are the ones with these African American candidates, with these Hispanic candidates, with leaders of the community being African American and Hispanic and coming out. You know, it's basically becoming either you're an average American, regardless of color, or you're this wacko like the women on The View.
Exactly. Now, I would say when we'll conclude on this, or I mean, conclude this section. Um, uh, oh, he's an ex-football player.
Herschel Walker.
Nope. He's a congressperson. I forgot Owens is his last name. And anyway, he was talking about something that we've talked about in terrestrial radio and on the podcast, and that is Burgess Owens. Is that he's an ex-football player? I think he played for the Cowboys. But anyway, the whole thing about, and he said it the other day, that he was talking about what liberalism and the Great Society did to the African American community. It's treasonous. They had faced real racism back in the 60s, early 60s, and during the formation of the Great Society. But in spite of that, they had higher church attendance, less divorces, less out of wedlock births than the white community. Fast forward 50 years later, 55 years later, and they have, I think, like what, 70% of African American kids are born without a father in the household.
Yeah, it is absolutely horrific
That's
what has
racism.
happened
That's
to
real
the
racism.
African American community over the past 60 years. And in fact, I know several African American men who are active in nonprofits to try to encourage fatherhood in the African American community, for African American men to be there for their kids and to return to, family values.
Well, if you tried to intentionally destroy an ethnic group, you could not have done a better job than liberalism has done to the African American community. And I think they're getting some payback. But speaking of payback, when you're California and you're led by geniuses like Gavin Newsom and previous geniuses, you actually have an exodus. Now you know you've reached rock bottom for people leaving California to Mexico.
Yes, this was a story on CNBC. There is a mass exodus of people from California, not just leaving the state to go to other states. Now they're leaving the country. How bad do you have to have a mass exodus from your state to Mexico, where on the way down, you're literally passing hundreds of thousands of people trying to get into the country?
You could make it up if it was a movie, but I think it speaks volumes. We talked about this before. I'm kind of an historian, a political historian, and you look back at, like, you watch a movie from the 1960s that had anything to do with California or an old TV show. California was it was God's country, literally. I mean, the land of milk and honey, opportunities, a booming just society and economy. And 60 years later, to have people going to Mexico, that is liberalism, correct?
It is. And in fact, it's gotten so bad. And I didn't believe this the first time I heard it, but I've heard it from a number of pundits since then. There is actually the possibility, for the first time in quite a while, that California may get a Republican governor to try to fix this mess.
That's not. If you said that to me 6 months ago, I'd say, come on, you've had a tough week of work. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
I thought
it could
the
actually
same
happen.
thing the first time I heard it.
Well, people, you can push them so far, and then they do reach a breaking point. Speaking of a breaking point, you have Paul Pelosi. Finally, we got the mug shot. I haven't seen the video cam, but he's still not charged with a DUI. How does that happen? I mean,
Well,
if I got a DUI,
yeah, it
how
was
do you get charged
reported.
that day?
It was reported that Nancy Pelosi reached out to Gavin Newsom to squash the DUI, and apparently, when you're Nancy Pelosi, you can do things like that. And this just goes to show, it's not a system that's inherently racist. It's geared towards those who have power.
No, liberal power. If it was
Yes.
Trump,
If
one of Trump's
if this had
people,
happened to one of Trump's kids, they'd have been locked up that day. The mugshot and the dash cam would have been on every broadcast network.
every. But this is really disturbing. It's like reminiscent of like a Politburo. It's not like he was drunk at a party. Fine, and then someone had a tape and they didn't put it on the air. Got it. DUI. First of all, it's not his first DUI. That's a criminal offense. You can't just say make it go away. I mean, how does that happen?
Well, this is what the liberal DAs in California, in New York City have been doing. They've just been deciding, yes, we know this is a crime, but we're not going to prosecute it. And this is why so many of them are now facing recall elections.
I wonder if you couldn't have a legal defense in California if you got a DUI and say, well, why is my client being charged when Paul Pelosi didn't get charged? It's equal justice under the law. Something to think about. Something else to think about is a tampon shortage. And, it's part of the supply chain that little Mayor Cutie Patootie, Mayor Pete, has done an outstanding job on in between maternity leaves. But, 10 years ago, that was a problem for women, but now it's pretty much a problem across the board because women aren't the only one that can really menstruate. So it's a problematic throughout society. I mean, I'm a little concerned.
I mean, according to Apple's emojis, men can be pregnant. According to Pete Buttigieg, this could, affect men as well.
I'm sure he could, and I thought liberalism in the Democratic Party was a party of science. I might have gotten that one wrong. Speaking of science, you have teammates of Leah Thomas basically saying behind closed doors, this person has a mental problem. And I'm all for gay rights, transgender, whatever, go for it. But have some
hang on a second, because let's take a step back there, because there has been a lot of backlash against the transgender community from the gay community. So let's be clear that these are two separate groups.
Okay, you're right. Correct, sir. Yes, I got it. Yep, you're right. But I mean, still, it doesn't get to the point of when I even saw her or him, it's like, where's the parents of this guy? And how do you do that? I mean, I couldn't even imagine doing that. Are you kidding me?
Well, again, if you follow
dressing up, go ahead.
If you follow the science, which liberals keep saying we're supposed to do, the Bible of the mental health industry is the DSM-5. And according to the DSM-5, which every psychologist, every psychiatrist has this in their office, they need to know this stuff. According to the DSM-5 and the American Psychiatric Association, being a transgender is a mental illness. It's called gender dystrophy. And getting sexual reassignment surgery is a treatment for this condition.
Well, it's what liberalism does. It takes something, let's say the gay rights movement, which is everyone's fine on board with that, and it always is never enough. And
you're hearing a lot of gay activists coming out and saying that the transgender community should not be riding on their coattails. They are gay, but they are proud to be a man or a woman.
And something, if I was gay, I would agree with that.
Completely different.
Wouldn't you agree with that if you were gay?
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, reached a point where we cancel for saying I am proud to be a man or I am proud to be a woman.
Well, its chapter continues. I think there's going to be increasing backlash, especially with Title 19, women's sports. I think it just blows that up. And where does it stop? In the Olympics? I mean, this thing's it's yet to be seen. Speaking of yet to be seen, Elon Musk, once the hero of the Democratic liberal establishment, no longer the case, said that he voted first time for a Republican, and that he will probably vote Republican in 2024. Talk about a things are just not going well for our Democratic friends, are they?
No, the Democrats are losing people right and left, and it's when these high profile people start saying, "Wait a minute, enough is enough." You know, Elon Musk has been saying he's going to vote Republican. Jeff Bezos started calling out Joe Biden. I mean, he's as liberal as you get. You're seeing this
Yeah, and
more and
also
more. We
tied to
saw,
and also tied to the Washington Post, which is
yes, he's
increasingly, incrementally, and the New York Times going against Biden. So Biden has his share of problems, and well deserved. But Elon Musk, one of the leaders of innovation in the world, no matter what they do, how they trash him, people still want to hear what he has to say. And I think it's a real bad day for our Democratic friends. Speaking of a bad day, more of the Hunter tapes came out, talking about his influence with his father and how his father thinks of him as just an all outstanding guy. Well, a little crack addiction here and there, addiction to porn, having sex with your dead brother's wife. Other than that, the guy's a stand-up guy.
yes, and in fact, his ex-wife has a memoir coming out
Oh
where
God.
she defends him.
Okay.
I mean, it is absolutely amazing. Now, it
Well,
also came out that he has uploaded videos of himself to porn sites.
oh yeah, no, that is something that I'm glad you brought up. I think someone got to those sites and put the kibosh on it, because you said this when we were in terrestrial radio. Once you put something in the what on the web, it's on the web.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
how come this stuff hasn't been retrieved? I think he
well,
uploaded it on something like Pornhub, it's called,
yeah,
because there was a documentary about it.
as I understand it, it was uploaded behind a paywall, so it wasn't freely available,
Oh,
which is
okay.
why people have not been able to get a hold of it. Um, I mean,
But
seriously, have
he uploaded the porn. Guess who one of his one of his partners was Bo's wife. Bo, the greatest
yes,
guy in the world. Bo, right there with Jesus Christ. Well, Biden family is really, I don't know about you, but that family seems really screwed up.
the family is very screwed up. And we talked about this on earlier episodes where Biden's daughter's diary came out, and the diary essentially accuses Biden of molesting her. And there was questions about its authenticity, but now people are saying, well, if it wasn't authentic, why did the FBI go to such lengths to retrieve it?
I wonder why.
If it was
Very
fake, they
interesting.
could have just said, "Oh, that's fake." It's not really her diary. And of course,
Well,
his daughter has
also,
been completely silent on it.
yeah, like I said, it's one heck of a family. It'd be a great miniseries, wouldn't it be?
Oh yeah,
Um, Also, we're looking at things not being reported. The assassination attempt on Brett Kavanaugh, and very interesting that AOC and I think 23 other knucklehead Democrats didn't
Twen-
vote for the protection
20,
bill.
27 Democrats in
Okay, yep.
total decided they did not want to support protecting the families of the Supreme Court justices.
I mean, you just whatever. I think in some ways I hate to say this, wouldn't be too disappointing if Kavanaugh wasn't taken out.
Well, that's just it. They don't want to spotlight the fact that this is a left wing wacko trying to kill a Supreme Court justice. If the situation was reversed and it was a right wing wacko trying to take out Sotomayor, every Democrat would have voted to protect them immediately. There wouldn't have been dragging out. And
Oh no, there would have been. Go
let's
ahead.
not forget that the Senate voted on this bill unanimously passing it, and Pelosi sat on it for almost a month.
Well, doesn't really surprise me, but she did really move very quickly with Paul's DUI, so she should maybe get her ass in gear and other things. Speaking of the trajectory, when we close on this, that retail sales fell unexpectedly high, dramatically, I should say, in May, and consumer confidence is at the lowest point ever recorded. And one thing I do know, or believe I know at least 50% of the economy is between your ears. When you feel good, people feel good, they spend, the economy's good. When people contract, it's almost like a domino effect. They don't go out to the movie, they don't do this, they don't do that, and you have a recession. So again, doesn't look good for the Democrats or Biden with those types of numbers. I mean, the worst consumer I think it's below 50.
Yeah, consumer confidence is down. The consumer price index is at the highest point in 40 years. The producer price index is at its highest point in 40 years. He keeps yelling about the job market. Oh, the job market is fantastic. Except when you actually look at the jobs report, the participation rate keeps dropping, which is why the unemployment rate is low. There are companies doing layoffs now in anticipation of a recession.
I know two of my friends that just got laid off from corporations. Yes.
Yeah. So the economy is not this strong economy that he wants people to believe. And essentially, what he's doing is don't believe your own eyes, listen to me.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think it's worth discussing because that is an issue that's also going to be detrimental for him in the midterms, and God forbid he tries to run in 2024, and that is the likability. He came in with high likabilities. He was going to be the uniter, all the above. But the more he talks, imagine if you're unemployed or you're someone barely making ends meet, and you see this guy totally detached, yelling at a microphone, has no compassion for your lot in life, talking about this great transition, and I don't mean transgender, but economic transition. Talking about being out of touch. Who has $60,000 for an electric car? Or how about people that already just bought a gas powered? What are you going to just turn it in and it's going to be worth nothing and buy a $60,000 electric car? So my point is that the more he speaks, the more he yells and talks and rant and raves, the more people think, first of all, this guy's unhinged. And second of all, he doesn't give a shit about me.
No, he has shown no empathy for the American people. And that is one of the biggest problems that the Democrats have right now is that lack of empathy. And they keep saying, well, it's a communications problem. We're not getting our ideas across. It's not a communications problem. Dana Perino on Fox News actually summed it up best. She said, a communications problem is when Joe Biden's microphone doesn't work. A, a, a policy problem is when Joe Biden's microphone does work.
No, yeah, sometimes he does nail it. And speaking, I just want to close on this. How about late night with Jimmy Kimmel? I remember him. He used to do the men's show, the Man Show. It was pretty funny. I mean, I watched it a couple times. It was okay, whatever. What the heck first of all, that interview had some about self-respect. Now, I think my cat could have done a better interview. And Biden's performance, my God, it's like Kimmel for the old people's home.
I mean, there's a reason that Kimmel is last in late night.
He sucks.
He has become a shill for the Democratic Party. And what really gets me is, he is a shill for the Democratic Party. Stephen Colbert is a shill for the Democratic Party. And yet, the highest rated show in late night is Greg Gutfeld.
Because he's funny and he's entertaining.
Who's not a shill. Bill Maher has been doing fantastic. He's been calling out the Democratic Party. Jon Stewart has been calling out the Democratic Party. Traditional comedians who have been supportive of the liberal agenda for decades have come out and gone, all right, you know what? Enough is enough. And yet, these idiots on late night are just too stupid, or maybe they're just too
No,
afraid
stupid.
that
No,
they'll
stupid
lose
is
their
the operative
job.
word.
But
Jimmy
it's
Kimmel.
absolutely amazing. They can't do their jobs. I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but prior to Trump taking office, Colbert was in danger of losing his job. And when CBS was going to let him go. And when Trump took office, he switched the whole show to bashing Trump, and they kept him on.
Well, his gig, Kimmel, and all three of them suck. I forgot the guy on NBC.
Fallon.
He sucks too. I saw him. It was pathetic. Like they had some idiot, some from Black Lives Matter or something, and this idiot Fallon was denouncing, like apologizing for being white. It was like pathetic. They're not funny at all. Johnny Carson would roast them like there's no tomorrow.
You don't even have to go back to Johnny Carson. I mean, Carson was
Jay
the
Leno.
king. Carson was the king of late night, but David Letterman, Craig Ferguson,
Yes.
These guys were fantastic. They put all of these guys to shame.
Well, that's why no one's watching, but it's also not just about ideology. When you look at Greg Guilfoyle for Fox, he's funny. I mean, the guy's funny. These guys are not funny. So, anyway, speaking of not being funny, I think we have a serious anniversary coming up, don't we? Are we close to our 200th?
I have to check, but I believe that next week's show is 200.
Very nice. We outdid CNN Plus.
Yes,
there you go.
We
We
did.
can put it on our tombstone.
Not only did we outlast CNN Plus, I believe we have more listeners than CNN Plus had viewers. So.
Well, we're certain of that. Well, Lopkin, always a pleasure. Great show today. And that's it.
Yes, if you'd like to chime in on any of the topics we've talked about, you can go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can find every episode of Carnivore Radio on xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Great show. See you next week.
We'll see you then.